The next day I took the subway up to the Columbia Medical School campus and walked to the building I'd been told to find, a 4-story brick and glass structure on St. Nicholas Avenue at 168th Street. Inside, the usual medical smell, the overcooled reception room with the tattered magazines, the white-coated receptionist behind her little window. They were expecting me. I filled out a medical form, lied about my drug use and my smoking, like everyone else, and was turned over to a nurse in pale blue scrubs who took me into a little room and told me to get into a gown. They said they wanted to make sure I was totally disease-free before they let me into a major drug study, so if I had a prior condition I couldn't come back at them with an accusation that their drug messed me up. A couple of hours later I found I was healthy, despite my lifestyle, still sound as a bell, apparently, just like crap. It was an impressive medical workup, bloods, scans, the whole 9 yards, and after it I had an even greater sympathy for my poor kid. After all the tests were done and I was dressed again, they led me to a small conference room with the other guinea pigs, and I saw Shelley himself, now a far cry from the pale slug he was in college, a man with a tan and longer hair, with the flossy rich guy cut they all have, and that aura of authority they must bolt on when they give out the med school diplomas. A dozen or so people in the room, all arty types, about evenly divided between the sexes, mostly younger than me. It looked like Sunday brunch at any hip place in Williamsburg. Dr. Z took us through a PowerPoint show about Salvinorin A, the drug we were about to pollute our bodies with. On the screen, a picture of some dusty Indians sitting around in a circle, Mazatecs from the deserts of Oaxaca, who used a plant called Salvia divinorum, the diviner's sage. Their shamans used it to break loose from time and see the future and the past. Silly them, because according to Shelley, it was all happening in the damp meat of their brains, like everything else we perceived. Over the last few decades, researchers had extracted the active principle of the Indian herb, salvinorin, and discovered that it was not an alkaloid, like most of the psychoactive drugs, but a much smaller molecule, a diterpene, and unique in that respect. It was a kappa opioid agonist. I recall that. Something to do with the control of perception. The drug had a variety of different effects, we learned, and these varied considerably between users. Of particular interest, though, was its ability to create the illusion that you were reliving a portion of your earlier life. Dr. Z said he thought that since the retention of childlike wonder and freshness of perception was widely considered to be a central element in the creative process, maybe salvinorin might enhance it, which was why he'd selected his subjects from artists and musicians. Then there was some technical stuff about how if they got psychological effects, they would use tracers and so forth to try to pinpoint the areas of the brain that did creative stuff. And then he closed with assurances that while the drug was extremely potent, it appeared to be quite safe and non-addictive. Then the usual questions from the floor, which Shelley handled, I thought, with a smoothness that had not been apparent in him as an undergrad. And the meeting broke up. I went up to him afterward, and we shook and did the whole small world thing, and he invited me for a private chat in his office, which was very nice. Golf clubs in the corner, all kinds of awards, blonde wood desk and chairs, flat-screen monitor, framed kids' drawings on the walls, and a small amateur oil of flowers in a vase, maybe by the wife. A happy family man, it seems. Good for Shelley. No talk about old times. He boasted and I listened. His great career, his beautiful family, his house in Short Hills. He said he saw my stuff in the magazines all the time. He thought it was great. He thought I was a success, just like him. He said he particularly wanted me in this study because it was really going to penetrate to the roots of creativity and even lead to ways of augmenting it. I thought that if he wanted to do that, he'd better bring his lunch. But I didn't say anything. Why rain on the guy's parade? I was happy for him, the poor schmuck, and it was $100 a session to me. After that, he turned me over to Ms. Blue Scrubs, and I had my first dose of salvinorin. They've discovered that the best way to ingest it is via the oral mucosa. They can heat the drug and shoot you the fumes, or they can give you a surgical sponge soaked with a solution of the drug, and you have to keep that in your mouth for 10 minutes. The first way brings on an intense reaction in a few seconds, but it fades in half an hour. The sponge works best. The reaction lasts for a full hour, more or less, and then drops off over the next hour. It's a way to provide a controlled dose, but still imitate chewing the leaves, which is what the Indians down in Mexico do. She took me to a little room, like an examination room, with a low-slung recliner, and left me with an observer in a white coat, nameplate Harris. Young woman, all business, notebook, tape recorder, and a comfortable chair to sit in, like psychotherapy. I made a joke to that effect. Minimal response. Message: this is serious research. She opened a plastic tub marked with a numbered label and extracted a damp surgical sponge with plastic tongs. She stuck it in my mouth and told me to chew on it for 10 minutes starting now. Clicked her watch. Try not to swallow, and then she dimmed the lights. I chewed on the cloth and kept the liquid it yielded in a cheek pocket, like a country boy pitcher on the mound. Faintly herbal, a little like turkey stuffing, not unpleasant. After 10 minutes, I was allowed to expel the wad. Then nothing for a while. I thought about the Vanity Fair project, about money, the usual sad, self-pitying thoughts about how essentially and irreparably screwed up my life was. Floating mind crap. After a while, I felt a certain relaxation, like I was looking at Chaz, thinking this shit, and finding it amusing. I guess I actually laughed a little then. Next, a feeling of vague physical discomfort, like my muscles were starting to cramp. That coach-class airliner feeling, and I got up and went for the door. Harris said I couldn't leave, so I sat down, got up, sat down, paced back and forth, energy flowing through my body, electric, vibrational, and crunching over gravel and dead leaves, the air chill and damp, and I'm just drifting, not really sad, but somehow feeling a déjà vu as if we're walking toward the gravesite at the head of a column of mourners, quite a few of them, more than I had expected, really. My sister in her nun's headscarf. They'd dumped the black clothes by then, holding onto my arm. I stopped and stumbled a little from the force of the disorientation, and she asked me what was wrong. I told her and said I'd never had a déjà vu that strong, and she said, "No wonder. It's not every day you bury your father." And we walked along, and the rest of the funeral played out. Charlie and I got a little drunk later, and she told me she was thinking about leaving the religious life. She liked helping the starving millions in the world's nasty places, but the good they could do seemed so paltry compared to the extent of the evil. Yes, it was good to give 20 girls a year a convent education and keep them from being raped by older guys, but there were hundreds and hundreds they couldn't help. The mothers would bring them to the school in Kitgum, crowds of women and girls begging for admission, knowing it was hopeless. But what else could they do? And somehow, now that our father was gone, a lot of the reason for it, as she now admitted, was gone too, and she felt she wanted to move into the world, not to leave religion exactly, but to be of some greater service. We talked about that for a while, what different orders of sisters did, and she asked me how my painting was going, and did I think I would start painting for myself now and not just to piss the old man off, and I laughed at that. We stayed up late talking, just like we'd done in the old days when we were kids, and she kissed me goodnight, and then I went up to my old room. It hadn't changed at all. The Indian blanket on the bed, my old hockey stick on the wall next to the painting of my mother, and that damp wicker smell from the old furniture. I got out of my clothes and was going to go to bed, but remembered I hadn't closed the French doors leading to the terrace, and if the wind shifted in the night, the rain would ruin the carpets. So I put my old blue plaid robe on and tried to open the door. The door wouldn't open, and I rattled the knob and pounded and kicked at it, and there was a hand on my shoulder, which scared the shit out of me because I was alone in the room, and I turned around, and this woman was there in a white coat with Harris on the tag, and I was back in the drug study.